which is Roadshow. And we're coming to you live from the High Commission here in Kingston, Jamaica. I'd like to welcome all of you here online, as well as our four panelists here this afternoon. And I am the moderator for the proceedings this afternoon. Let me first introduce the four panelists, and then we'll proceed into the agenda. So to my far is Mr. Ansel Hewitt. My apologies, Ansel, who is a Director General of the Office of Utilities Regulations here in Jamaica. To my immediate left is Mr. Lennox Elvey, who is a chairman of the Generation Procurement Entity. I'm sure they could have come up with a better name than that, right? Yeah, but we leave it as it is, right? It is what it is. And of course, to my right, we have a young man who goes without, I should say young man. Norman and myself go back quite a few years through prep school, and then of course through IT and so on. So Norman Nair, welcome, sir. Thank you. And again, my name is Simon Roberts, and just like to welcome you all here to this session this afternoon. So in the first few minutes, what I want to do is have a conversation with you, sir. Try and ask you some really hard questions, and see if you can back well at the wicket. Of course, we have a Canadian audience, so I'm sure perhaps better to say that you can stand well at the what I want to ask first is if you could kind of lay the groundwork for all of us to understand where in the entire process of policy framework, plans for the future, and then ultimately getting the equipment actually planted in the ground here and operational. Where does the GPE actually fit in? And what role do you play in making things happen here in Jamaica?
All right. Afternoon again. The GPE is a creature of statute, and the prime on the Electricity Act of 2015 is created. Its main role is to see to the procurement of new generating capacity for the electricity grid, as well as deal with the replacement of existing capacity by the single buyer here in Jamaica. So we have one electricity utility company here in Jamaica, so we're responsible for seeing to the replacement of their assets, which is under their license, as well as to add new capacity to the grid. So over the last 18 months, we would have spent the time developing a framework in terms of, the whole procurement aspect of the generation of attracting new generating capacity to the country and building out that framework with our partners, the IDB, through consultations, etc. And we got to a point late last year, early this year, where that framework was pretty much ready. And we are now at the stage where we are, kicking into gear to get to the market in a fulsome way. Week and a half ago, we would have released our expression of interest for 100 megawatts of renewable energy. So based on that release, we would have indicated some high-level timeframes where other bits and pieces of information in relation to the process will follow until we get to the stage of the RFP stage that we envisage will take place in another couple of weeks, month or two. So that is outlined there as to where the process is at and where we're hoping to go. We're hoping to wrap up this process of RFP bids, winner selection, etc. By late November of this year, in terms of the first round of auction that we are looking at. And there are plans for additional auctions soon as well too, but as I said before, we're testing out the framework with 100 megawatt here, just to ensure that all the pieces are where they should be, and all things are working as planned and as designed, and then we move on into the next.
So it's an interesting mix that we have here. The Jamaica Public Service is the sole buyer of electricity in the country, and the only organization by law that is allowed to transmit power across property lines. That's sort of an interesting definition, but it works. And so whoever is here, either directly JPS or independent power producers, they're able to sell only to JPS as the sole owner of the transmission network. Where I want to try and understand though is that JPS has their power plants. Those power plants have a lifespan, and some of them are coming up to being end of life. And so you're going to have to replace some of those. And then, of course, the goal as stated by the government is that we need to get to 50% renewables by 2030. That seems to me to be a pretty tall order to place on your shoulders, but it is on your shoulders, it was. And the question then is, after this 100 test case, if I can use it that way, of attracting RFPs for this 100 megawatts, what are you expecting in terms of the total quantum of megawatts that you're looking to either put in new or to replace over the next 4 years?
All right. So in relation to we are the procurement entity, right? So GPE procures based on what is outlined in the integrated resource plan. Mm-hmm. So the version of that plan that is now approved and in front of us calls for 468 megawatts of renewable energy over the next couple of years. So we have started off here with 100, as we said before, and then we will, as we go through the market, look to do further tranches down the road. So 268 based on what is in the approved plan in front of us. But as you said before, these plans are updated biannually, and I think it's on that process of review right now. So things could change, but based on what is approved and is in front of us, the plans are augmented every 2 years. In relation to the capacity that is to be replaced by JPS, the law is silent, I would say. So there's nothing stopping JPS from replacing some of the existing firm capacity that they have now in terms of fossil fuel type plants with renewables. There's nothing that bars that. So that's a commercial decision, commercial consideration, and technical considerations as well too, based on the role that some of these fossil fuel plants play in system stability, etc. But nothing prevents them from doing a mix of renewables and fossil fuel type in the replacement at this point in time.
Does your 100 megawatt expression of interest and eventually RFP, is it specific in terms of the type of energy source?
No. We will allow the sources to compete. Mm-hmm. So it is not energy specific. So we'll allow the different forms of renewables energies to compete in order to come away with best option.
So let's talk a little bit then about what would constitute best option, right? What is it that from an investor point of view, they would need to know that they have to cross this threshold to be able to even be considered?
All right, so at this stage, I would not be able to disclose those considerations, because as I say, we are actively in market now. We have an expression of interest that has opened, and we'd want all markets to see that information all at once. So I would not be able to communicate on that issue specifically, but the terms will become clear in another week and a half thereabout, when we release our term sheets in relation to the offer, in this expression of interest period, whereby there'll be some clear guidelines to move the process forward, where investors can see, some of the clear benchmarks and mileposts that we'll be using.
Okay, so I guess I can speak from what's in the public domain, though, in terms of what has been installed relatively recently. The South Jamaica power plant was put in. That is actually natural gas, for those who wouldn't know. And that regasification plus actual generating plant came live during COVID. I guess that's the best way. There was before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID, and so I know that it was during COVID it came live. But that one, I think the goal was to try and get down to a cost, and I'm going to say a number, and I'd like the others to correct me, but it was somewhere about 11.8, maybe 12 cents US per kilowatt. You needed to fall below there. Don't quote me with the decimals or whatever, but there was a maximum output cost that you would be charging to the grid. Otherwise, it would be deemed nonsensical, because it would simply increase the cost of electricity to the consumers. So that being said, I'm not going to pry any further in the area. As you say, it's public knowledge until it becomes public next week or a week and a half. Okay, that's fine.
So the issue is price is going to be a major consideration. So there, it's an auction, it's a bid, and persons will seek, and entities, normally price is a significant factor in these sort of considerations. So without saying anything specific, yes, price will be a major issue that would be in the mix in terms of what it is we intend to look at and to do from a policy perspective. It is a stated intent of the government to move in that particular direction in regards to price.
So I guess by definition, obviously, although I'm hearing discussions now around green hydrogen as being a fuel source, and green methane as a fuel source as well. It still is ultimately a hydrocarbon with hydrocarbon emissions. So I guess for that 100 megawatt block that you've gone to market or will be going to market with, those are specifically excluded.
The term sheet will speak in some amount of detail some of the pertinent definitions around the particular auction, and as the market will see that. And as I said before, we are the procuring entity, so we take the need and the ask, and we go to market to try and deliver that in that regard. But there'll be some clear definitions around aspects of what would be important in the term sheet to be released in a couple of days.
Okay, so stay tuned for the term sheet.
Yes,
ultimately.
definitely.
But is there anything with regards to the other block, which is, you said that the IRP is 268 megawatts. when would we expect those blocks to start showing up with a request, request for intent and that kind of stuff? What sort of timeline are you working on?
So I
Conceptually.
yeah, it's conceptually, I would say if the first auction and get us to a place and we close off in terms of sign off on contracts, etc., in late November. I don't think we're at a stage yet where we'd be able to run this process necessarily, simultaneously, to be running multiple auctions at the same time. So I think pretty soon after we wrap up, and we intend to wrap up the in terms of the auction process, etc., by late November, I could see us going back into market as soon as the first quarter of the
24.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as I said before, not to say that if situations changes and there's an ability to do things ahead of what we are forecasting, we wouldn't take that opportunity. So stay tuned. But I think from where we are at now, looking out to Q1 2024 for the second set of auction would be a reasonable expectation.
You'd made mention earlier about the integrated resource plan, IRP. Is that now in the public space that potential investors, interested parties could actually take a look at it?
It's on the Ministry of Energy's website. So they can,
so I guess that's great, because again, transparency for investors and for concerned citizens, the ability to obtain information as to understand how the government of Jamaica is proposing to change our energy mix from currently 81%, I think it is. We're at 19% renewables now, up to 50%. In 6 years. Clearly the IRP and its revisions will be the source of guidance to yourselves and to others as to what to do. So the IRP is available. I guess that's a big message to everybody out there. Please avail yourselves of the opportunity to read it and to understand what's contained in it. It has tremendous detail around what needs to go where in the supply mix, and obviously the transmission mix as well, to make the electrical supply, the energy supply of the country more robust. And again, for those in the audience from overseas, just to let you know that anything being proposed needs to be, I can't say hurricane proof, but I have to say significantly hurricane resistant. And also we're in an earthquake zone that is the equivalent of California. I've had the opportunity to do some construction over the years, and apparently we are in a zone that's California, but not Los Angeles. Los Angeles being worse than California. So if you're planning to move, I guess LA is not the place to move, but from an earthquake point of view. So with the GPE as an organ of government, of policy, and of law, you run that. Are there resources that you would wish to be able to have that you don't currently have at your fingertips, that you'd want to be able to obtain to be more efficient?
With any entity, especially a relatively new one, resourcing is a consideration, but that is being addressed as we speak through a number of partnerships here. Again, the multinational agencies have provided very, very good support in relation to the work that we are undertaking at this particular point in time, and has indicated, that they would continue to support us in this particular regard. So we have, a solid foundation in terms of support now. So it's just a matter of executing the elements of the strategy, the build out of the GPE to some extent, and continue to embed this new slash updated procurement program within the GPE itself, and getting into market here and getting that sort of the results that we're focused on getting. So yes, there are needs, but the needs are being addressed at this point in time in a way that we think is sustainable and reasonable.
So if there's a need for moving forward, is if there's a gap in that, you are currently in a position, you're reasonably comfortable that you will be able to find the resources that are necessary to get your part of the picture completed in a timely fashion.
Yes, I think based on the funding that has been earmarked in relation to some of the activities that we need to undertake in the short to medium term, I think we and some of the other work and consultancies going on behind the scenes at the moment, I think we're reasonably comfortable that we are in a path to get to where we want to get to over the short to medium term, and that is happening at a pace that we can feel comfortable with.
Throwing a little curve at you, the whole issue of electrification of transportation, and in combination the procurement of electricity. It seems that the math suggests that as you get more and more vehicles that are electric or hybrid, you're going to end up having a higher demand for electricity. How do you think that's going to play out? And I know you're kind of in a position where you have many things close to your chest, but do you, and to be clear, I know the government has come out with a very clear statement of policy around significantly and rapidly expanding the use of electric vehicles in Jamaica. So it seems to me that more electric vehicles, more demand for electricity. I anticipate that the IRP would have taken at least that in part into account. But what do you think? I mean, what's your sense of?
Here again, a little bit, that's outside of my swim lane, but I'll just say that to the extent that it will create a movement in demand, it at the points in time when the IRP is iterated, then that change or expected change in demand gets pulled up into the newer versions of the IRP, and then from there again, now we would execute what is on our plate to meet that. Now the policy position on that, I think, is still a work in progress. I don't know if I would have seen a firm this is the electric vehicle type policy out there ready and raring to go, but I think it will be a part of the future, and I anticipate that iterations of the IRP will have to take whatever demand is coming in from wherever in forming and making the decisions that we would have to make in that regard going forward. So I think it would naturally feed into it, and we would naturally have to fill that demand once it rises through whatever, the sources that we generally use to augment demand at this point in time.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you as a last question as time catches up on us, about what was in the media last week. We've had a lot of things in the media last week. I won't ask you about the other big thing that was in the media last week. That's out of bounds here. But certainly what was mentioned, I think, certainly within the last couple of weeks, was the very clearly stated intent to put nuclear as a part of the potential source of energy mix in Jamaica. And I know sometimes it is the policymakers will make statements to in essence stimulate discussion and debate, but it seemed a little bit more than that. It seemed a defined position that nuclear would become part of our mix. And of course, this is a small package nuclear stuff, because we certainly don't need big. And I guess the question again is, how are you geared up to address that potential set of questions that are going to come at you?
Well, in that particular issue, again, we are guided by what is in the IRP in terms of what it is we would go to market and the considerations that are involved there. So if it moves from discussion to a point of where you would now have to consider that as a part of the energy mix, then the IRP framework here again would have to take that on board, because it's the total energy need and prediction of the country that gets captured there. We would certainly, as a country, would not have done it before in terms of that particular form. So it might, if and when, if we do get to that stage, I suspect this would be a very particular set of skill set, and even the whole aspect of how that is procured might be different. So it's, I'm just speculating here. So as I say, if it comes through the IRP, then it is something that we would have to consider from that framework, because that is how we procure, and whatever is required to support that, then that's sort of the actions and activities that would necessitate that would have to be put in place. But at this stage, based on the version that we have here and now, renewables is what is in the mandate in the short to medium term. And as I said before, as the IRP iterates, changes will occur and changes can occur. And if it's it's our mandate to procure what is in share there.
Okay, so just a point. I please correct me if I'm wrong, other panelists, but I do believe that there is a small nuclear reactor up at University of West Indies, but it's been there for 400 years. Well, not quite, but a slowpoke reactor, I suspect. So it's very low yield, etc., for research purposes. So we actually do have a nuclear reactor in Jamaica. It's just that it's not often spoken about. But thank you very much. We are essentially at time. So thank you very much for sharing your specific guidance from a procurement entity point of view. Lennox, really appreciate it. We're going to open it up now. I see that the schedule actually calls for a 5-minute break, but I suspect that these two gentlemen look like they're absolutely raring to go. Yeah. So we're going to continue now. So again, just by way of reintroduction, Mr. Ansel Hewitt, on my extreme left, you're the Director General of the Office of Utilities Regulation. So you too have been involved in the IRP, but more so from a regulatory point of view. Would you be able to kind of give us and the audience a 25-cent tour of how the OUR fits into all of this picture, please? Answer.
Thank you very much, Simon. Yes, the GPE is the procuring entity. The ministry does the planning and is responsible for developing the IRP. We have been lending some assistance to the development of IRP1, and I'm told IRP2. But then our substantive role is going to be in terms of looking at the PPAs that come out of this process.
PPA, please let us avoid the acronym, so elaborate on the acronym.
Sure, I'm sorry, the power purchase agreements.
Right, so the power purchase agreements would be from the prospective supplier, the investor, putting in some sort of renewable energy plant, and the sole buyer, which is JPS, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and we have a particular interest in terms of the price, the rates that comes out of this, the rates that come out of this process. Because clearly, as a regulator, what we're seeking to do is to have electricity transmitted to the ratepayers at the lowest economic cost. So we're interested in a process that will result in that. We are going to be looking at the terms and conditions of the PPA, of the power purchase agreement, in terms of, the kind of, from time to time, disputes will arise and disagreement will arise between the entity trying to sell and the purchaser, which is currently JPS. So we would expect that we will be called upon where there are disagreements to arbitrate and to move the process along, and ultimately to get to a point where electricity is being delivered, and that electricity is being delivered at rates that come out of the auction.
Okay. So is it possible then that the auction could actually end up with a non-economic selling price? I know that's a strange question, but and if that were to happen, what would we do?
Right. So you're going to the market, and the economic rate in theory is the rate that the market offers. I think what we're concerned to ensure is that the process is such that it does not allow for distortions. That so we're keen to see what is happening in terms of the auction process and how it is organized, the risks that are priced, the signals that are sent to prospective bidders, so that you don't get a price that is in any way distorted. The truth is that every time that we have gone to market, we have come out with lower rates.
Okay.
Right? So we would hope that that is going to be the trend. And to the extent that the technology is evolving, you would certainly expect that the rates are going to be lower this time around. That's our hope. That's what we would expect. But the proof of the pudding, of course, is going to be in the eating.
Yeah. So let me turn my attention now to Norman. Norman, you are with JAMPRO. JAMPRO is our governmental agency, and these are my words, not yours, so you can correct me, right? Governmental agency that is there to facilitate investment. But I know that that's like the 30,000-foot statement. Would you be able to elaborate for me how you see JAMPRO working with these prospective investors that are, putting in bids? How would you help them to get to the finish line?
So thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me. And also good afternoon to the audience who is joining online. So JAMPRO plays three primary roles as we engage with investors. And the first is in its name. the Jamaica Promotions Corporation. In the first instance, we are leading the charge around creating an awareness through promotion of the opportunities that's in the energy space. So we have been having over the years a number of conversations with potential investors who are keen on coming in the market for renewables. So this long-awaited RFP has been, a subject of discussion, and we have had many interests. So, we continue to promote the space, and we see the energy sector as a critical sector, critical pillar in supporting a number of our other sectors in the economy. I mean, manufacturing and you name it, energy is a critical pillar. The second element of JAMPRO's role is to facilitate investors. And so we work both with the teams that are pre-implementation as well as post-implementation. And so as part of that arrangement, we have a support team internally geared specifically to support investors. And in so doing, they facilitate all the engagements with the various stakeholders that's involved in this whole process to get the projects going. We have, business matchmaking. So people who have land and, technical interests, we tend to facilitate the matching of the two. Just coming to this session, I'm leaving a meeting from another potential investor. It just speaks to the active role that we're playing. The landscape is one that must be navigated carefully, and so we provide support in terms of guidance to the investors as far as the permits and licensing and so on, and help them through that process. So we support them right throughout the pre-implementation, and once they have implement or in the state of implementing the project, we continue to support them. And then the final role as part of what we do as JAMPRO is to continue to support and create a business environment that supports investors. We want to create a friendly environment for our potential investors. And so we are constantly working and looking at initiatives that make it easier to do business in Jamaica. So I think by and large, those are the roles that JAMPRO has been playing, certainly working across the spectrum in support of the energy delivery.
So if I could just follow up on that doing business, there is a much spoken about international metric, talking about doing business with. And it seems that the legislative framework and changes that have been made over the last 10 years, I'd say about 10 years, maybe a bit more, have dramatically improved that doing business in Jamaica. I don't know if you'd care to comment on that as well.
Yeah, so this initial international benchmark established, I think it was World Bank, we had ascribed a program to help, improve our rankings on the Do Business Index, that worldwide index. That since has become defunct, as some of you may be aware. But the underlying principle of continuous improvement remain part of our ethos, and so there are versions of those programs that we have undertaken. You'll have seen, for example, some of the improvements coming through the company's office, and more recently, the launching of the Jamaica Business Gateway. The Jamaica Business Gateway is a portal website intended to, at least in the first instance, we have established some 14 processes, government processes that investors will have to interact. And those processes, has been streamlined on the portal to enable any investor to find out where their documents are, as they move along the investment trail. This is a significant improvement because, as you know it, you have to know somebody, have to have some relationship, understand what is taking place, and just this constant follow. this is a platform. We are moving firstly into technology world. We're creating a transparent platform that any investor is able to ascertain where they are in these various processes, whether it is work permitting, whether it is, registering your company, etc. All of these processes are now on a technology platform. And if nothing else, I think that has been the most significant improvement that we have made to enable doing business in Jamaica much easier at this point in time.
Okay, so the goal of transparency and people being held accountable for what they're supposed to do within the JAMPRO space, as well as all of the various agencies of government that allow a business to get established and to, let's say they're successful in their bid, the GPE is happy and has given them the good housekeeping seal of approval. They then need to do all of this work. And what I'm hearing you say is that JAMPRO is open and wants to help them get through the bureaucracy that is inherently necessary.
Yes.
People always think of bureaucracy as a bad word, but in fact, it's a necessary word in any organization, any country. It's just when bureaucracy becomes encrusted, for lack of a better phrase, that it becomes problematic. Yeah. So creating a portal and enabling that sort of transparency, as I said earlier, is clearly an excellent step in the right direction. I guess what we're really saying then here, everyone in the audience, is that what we actually have is the person who you're going to have to negotiate with to person, the organization that you're going to have to negotiate with when you decide that you want to do business. You have the person here who is going to be able to give you guidance once you have gotten your winning bid in, to get you through the process of actually putting, steel and concrete in the ground, so to speak. And then thereafter, you also have the protection from the regulator to adjudicate should there be any conflict between yourself or any frictions, and assist you from a, I can't use the word assist, but to provide guidance in terms of what is needed from PPA point of view and beyond. Because not only is there a PPA, but there is obviously going to be annual adjustments to cost and so on that would have to be necessarily built in. So this is where it kind of sits at the beginning of the process for those who would wish to invest in 100 megawatts of renewables, soon to be more than that. And what form that takes and how much it will actually end up being is a moving target, simply because although, and I guess I should back up and say that up until last year, I could be wrong on that, but I think around last year, our target was 30% renewables by 2030. And then we woke up one morning to hear that, no, it's 50%. And I think that's admirable. It's more challenging, more difficult, but we could end up doing a great service to our citizens and our businesses by being able to move away from a reliance on fossil fuels with its inherent, polluting issues, but also you actually don't control the cost of your energy because you don't control the cost of the fuel. Thank goodness Jamaica is tropical and able to, we're blessed with a lot of sun and a lot of wind, and we have a lot of water as well for other forms of energy sourcing. So that said, Lennox, I guess you've heard the roles of these two gentlemen. How would you want to collaborate more with them without crossing the boundaries of separation of responsibilities?
I think it's a part of the energy team from the public sector space. So we work closely with the OUR. They are the experts in certain areas, PPAs, pricing, all of these things. That's their areas of expertise. We don't step over. And of course, the OUR would have executed procurement for renewable in the past before the creation of the GPE. So there's a tremendous amount of knowledge base and historical experience on that side, and we are leveraging that for all it is worth, because it makes no sense to to recreate the wheel of such. So we work very closely and consult along the way as we seek to to develop certain things and to execute our own mandates. So there's a very, very close working relationship in that regard, but we, as I said before, recognize the separation of the roles in that regard. And I think JAMPRO will bring tremendous service to the table as we move a little bit further down the wicket, and the potential new investors are on the table, and they might need some amount of handholding in relation to the domestic environment, separate and apart from the energy space in particular. So we have no issues here again in anything that allows us to execute better, execute quicker. We are all for that, because we want to ensure that we can deliver what is required of us at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just add to that, in terms of the role, JAMPRO, you're right. We're going to be there lending support as far as facilitating the investment. And whilst the RFP is the big thing on the market, we have been working with a number of energy players in the space doing exactly what we say that we can do. So for example, Cleantech Energy, who has done the solar wind farm, Blue Mountain Renewables, and of course Content Solar are all renewable players in the market that we have worked extensively well to help facilitate their implementation. So just more of underscoring the kind of effort that and the support that JAMPRO brings to the table in facilitating these kinds of investment.
Thanks, Norman. So answer there is a need to recognize that the vast majority of renewable energy is intermittent. Wind does not blow all the time, and the last time I checked, the sun sets at some point every day, right? Different time every day, but it does set, right? And it rises hopefully the next morning for us, right? The intermittency of that power source necessitates something else. Could you care to comment on what the OUR is doing to make sure that we don't get it wrong? I guess that's a fundamental thing. Answer.
Right. And you're right that there is this matter of intermittency. The evolving thinking is that renewables are getting closer and closer to the point where you can rely on them as all the time with the addition of storage. When we did the procurement with regard and two-stage procurement with regard to renewables, after the first one, there was a concern about intermittency, and the single buyer had a proposal for a storage solution, which we look favorable at and approve that kind of investment. The OUR also has been concerned about how do you make sure that the grid is transformed in order to deal with this intermittency issue, and we have approved the kind of investment in looking at the rate application of the grid operator to fortify the grid. So to help to deal with this so that you get a lot more smart technology and so on. The investment, the LNG investment has been a boon in that regard because it has also allowed for the kind of installation of plants that can ramp up very quickly and to deal with some of the intermittency issues. But we anticipate that the solutions that are coming, to the extent that they are promised, they're promising firm capacity, we'll have to tell, we'll have to say how it is that they are going to ensure that this capacity is always available. What is the storage component of that, and what are the arrangements? So we expect to see that coming out.
Okay. So you're anticipating that in the 100 megawatt bid, it won't just be 100 megawatts intermittent, it will be 100 megawatts that hopefully will be firm. Speaking to the
wait, all right. So, what I can say is our procurement process design and framework is flexible to deal with the issues that are being raised at this point in time. Whether the rollout of that flexibility is in this first auction or subsequent auction is, the market will be aware in a couple of days' time what our intent is for this first auction. But the design of the procurement framework is flexible to deal with the issue of energy only and elements of firmness in terms of a system design. But we have the option to execute how we see fit based on the consultation with the designers of the IRP, etc., as we move to market. But just to underscore that the framework is flexible to address.
So the IRP, you're hoping to get that published when?
Well, the IRP is not us. The term sheet for the current expression of interest, the estimated date is next Friday. So I don't know exactly. So it's next Friday. And the expression of interest can currently access it at www.jis.gov.jm. So that is where it's at now, and the prospective dates are outlined on the website there.
Okay. So I'm an investor tuned into this discussion this afternoon, and JAMPRO has said that they're going to make it a lot easier for me to do the investment once I satisfy certain requirements, right? Then the question is, are there any incentives that are available to investors, both domestic and overseas, for getting involved in this capital expenditure?
Yeah, so the government, some time ago had put together a revamp of the incentive policy to create a general incentive policy for a number of investors. Or in the case of what we're looking at here for the renewable, this energy, because it's essentially a manufacturing concern. We're transforming raw sources into energy, so it's manufacturing. There is the productivity input relief, where one can get the duties, removal of duties, both stamp duties, as well as the general consumption tax being applicable, those removal of those duties for organizations who are looking to bring equipment in to do this kind of manufacturing effort. Of course, there are other, kind of incentive, the employee tax credits and so on, and a whole list of benefits associated with it. But, just at the top end, all the equipment that is coming in, both the consumption tax, GCT, those are waived, and indeed reduction on the duty, the stamp duty associated with the equipment is coming in. So those are some of the major, investments major incentives, I should say, that, a potential investor can look at. And as I said, we have been doing this with other players in the market and helping to facilitate and, them getting some of these benefits.
Okay, just for the record, the general consumption tax in Jamaica is at 15% right now.
15%.
Unless you're bringing in a car and it's not really 15%. It's some of the tax, but so GCT is at 15%, and then there's all the other stamp duties and so on that would also be waived for this concept, which I think is very important for the potential investor to know, because they would now be able to extract that cost out of their bid. If they made the incorrect assumption that they have to pay duties and taxes and so on for the importation of their equipment, then they would actually be overstating what would be a true cost for them. So useful point, sir. Thank you. Is there information at www.jampro.com or
it's it's dobusinessjamaica.com. So dobusinessjamaica.com.
Dobusinessjamaica.com. All right. So answered the need for as was the expression has been used over many years about joined up government, where we try to do things that facilitate the person who's trying to do business rather than simply be in our silos and hit the check boxes that we need to hit. Can you comment for us on your perspective about how well we're doing and what we could actually be doing better to facilitate investment and to make a potential investor coming in on this 100 megawatts and other beyond to be able to do that better?
Right. And again, it's a very important question because, we do find that sometimes there is a disjoint. There is a sense that you are asked to duplicate information, or you may even have processes that are somewhat contradictory. So it is important to ensure that we think about who are the key players in this. And clearly, as Lennox pointed out, there is the consideration with regard to JAMPRO's involvement, the OUR's involvement. There are other regulators, the local authority, NEPA, all of those entities that, you're going to have discussions with. And you're going to ensure that the potential investors know who they will need to go to forward. And to the extent that you can get a very clear fix on what their process is and what their requirements are, you include those in your information set. And I'm sure that all of this is going to be done by the GP. We're doing better at it, but at each iteration, we have discovered that there are other things that we need to do. And I'm sure that the GPA will discover that there are some additional things that can be done to make the process smoother. There's a lot of, to the extent that you engage in some pre-consultations and allow investors some kind of forum in which they can perhaps signal some of the things that they're interested in or keen about. And to the extent that the process allow them to ask questions, you will discover how you can assist the process more and how you can make it smoother. And I know in the past, JAMPRO has been very, very active in ensuring that we provide the information up front, that we make it easy for people to follow the procedures so that the process is as seamless as it can be.
So I'll just follow up on that answer. When you use the term that JAMPRO had been very, very active, and I saw a smile on your face, I think what he was really saying is that you were persistent.
Yeah, no. So, we have a team, certainly around energy. Yeah, that is persistent in that regard. And it's the service that we try to provide for our client base. I mean, our objective is to, grow investments in the country, man. So it's a mantra of ours. And to the extent that we can accelerate that, our effort is lending support around reducing the time in which you get that, and of course the cost. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention in all of the support that we're providing, from a JAMPRO perspective, is that there are entities who provide similar service at a cost. The government has put together this organization called JAMPRO that does exactly that. And whilst it's free of cost to investors, there is a cost for doing, lending the services that we do. And I think people need to avail themselves of the kind of support that we provide and the guidance that we provide. And so I just want to put it out there, to directly engage with us at JAMPRO.
Okay, so somebody coming in obviously would put in their response to their request for interest or request for response, and I guess their first stop then would have to be JAMPRO to make sure afterwards to make sure that they get a proper understanding of what it takes within Jamaica to make that investment bear fruit ultimately, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, to the extent that we can, we certainly provide that guidance. I mean, even coming to this meeting, before I told you we met with another investor. And one of the questions, if you can answer that, I would appreciate. One of the questions asked is that whilst it's a contiguous chunk of 100 megawatts that we're looking at, whether or not, it's a single player that potentially could go to, or is it that we're looking at, smaller chunks of 30, 20, that will ultimately get us to the 100. So I know each bidder will have an interest in zeroing on the 100 megawatts, but from a decision standpoint, just from my own perspective, putting all your eggs in one basket is certainly a consideration for a reliable energy platform that we're talking about here, or whether or not some of this would be splintered. And to the extent that you can share, wouldn't mind if you give a perspective. This is kind of information that we try to provide our clients. So if you could comment on that, I would certainly appreciate it.
Yeah. You will be in a position to fully update your clients in another week or so. The information around that will be made public. But as I said, stay tuned to for the term sheet in another couple of days, and all of that will become very clear in a couple of days.
So one of the things that comes out as a kind of a hybrid to the question is it may make better sense, rather than to build 100 megawatt facility, you may actually want to geographically separate them for resilience on the grid. I mean, a hurricane comes across and takes out a part of the island, you have the other parts of the island resilient. Is that, are you open to that discussion?
At this stage, there is nothing in the EOI that speaks to sizing, other than the fact that we are seeking a particular capacity.
Okay.
But we have not indicated anything in that EOI that speaks to sizing, quantum size, and any of those issues at this point in time. So I'm saying let's stay tuned for another couple of days, and we will see what the thought process of the
I think I
GPE
got your
is
answer though.
in relation to that particular question. But that will be answered clearly in a couple of days.
Okay.
So basically by end of next week, we will, the public and the potential investors will have it clear as to what the intention
Yeah,
is from the GPE.
Yes,
right?
a term sheet will a term sheet will be there that will be useful now in guiding the process as to what the ask is and what it is. We are, you know, the key features that we'll be looking for in this expression of interest phase, as we, you know, the market will have an opportunity. So after the expression of interest, there'll be a period for question and answer. There'll be a webinar like this where we engage the potential persons. So all of that is designed in the
Leading,
process, and
okay.
it's on the website now as to the high level timelines for that. So, you know, so all of that will be done before we get to the firm RFP stage now. So this is the process of you know, looking at interest, soliciting feedback, soliciting comments that could potentially cause us to, you know, tweak also what comes to the market in terms of a final RFP in a couple of weeks down the road.
Okay, all right, excellent. So answered the issue, the role of regulator is sometimes a vexing one, right? Because you're kind of the meat in the sandwich sometimes. The person, the entity that's generating or supplying the service, and of course, you are also by law required to do everything you can to protect the consumer. And it's always this difficult balance to try and be able to provide an adequate return on investment or sufficient return on investment to the investor, but at the same time, not ending up with the cost of service for whatever utility it may be it, you know, water or telephony, you know, data, or of course, as we're speaking here today, electricity, energy, let me just say. The issue to me is one of how do you as regulator almost walk between the raindrops, and if you could share with us a few of your thoughts as to how has it been and what would you like it to be if things became better.
Right. So sorry, and in terms of how has it been, as you've said, you're pretty much walking between the raindrops. You know, the OER takes the view, as I said from the outset, that we're keeping our eyes fixed firmly on trying to lower cost, but at the same time, in a way that makes sure that the service is sustainable. At the end of the day, if we lower cost and somebody goes to the switch and there's no electricity, then we have really failed. So you want to make sure that there is sustainability at the most economic cost. Now, when you go through the market process that the GP is going through, you hope that you end up with the best. What we sometimes are troubled by, or what is niggling for us, I think, is because there are provisions for some other processes, unsolicited proposals sometimes, and those have to be, that you have to demonstrate on the face of it that there is some kind of national interest consideration. Those are a little more difficult because then you are asking the regulator to consider other things outside the price. And if you, to the extent that the government wants us to do that, we normally say, well, you need to be explicit about it, so that we can say, this is really the economic cost. And then this is a component that is added because of the national considerations. Now, an interesting thing that we find is that very often persons are coming to offer electricity, say, we're going to offer electricity to grid, but the hope is that that electricity is going to subsidize another line of business. And the argument is that that line of business creates other kind of economic opportunities, and therefore you need to consider it. So there is a constant pressure. And again, which is on the face of it, nothing may be wrong with that. But as I said, as an economic regulator, we want to be able to determine the cost of electricity in terms of the production cost of electricity, nothing else.
Nothing else.
Right.
So much in the news over last several months has been a discussion around waste to energy. And the idea, of course, is that our municipal waste disposal sites are less than desirable in terms of how they process waste. We have an inadequate ability to properly separate and recycle waste. And I know of many entities overseas that have been knocking on the door, as I understand it, looking at the potential of getting their hands on one or more of our sites. Would you be able to comment at all? I'm going to throw this to Lennox first, in terms of, again, this consideration about, okay, the cost of energy is X with a waste to energy facility, but it's serving a dual purpose of reducing the issue of a landfill. What's been your experience thus far in the seat, and where do you think that's going to end up?
All right, so our swim lane is competitive addition of capacity to the grid and the replacement of existing capacity in the grid.
Okay.
The law makes provision where the government can take on board considerations in relation to, or look at other projects on a government to government basis, and that's sort of thing that they could seek to implement. But from the perspective of the GPE, twofold. It's competitive procurement, and it's guided here by the economic consideration and the replacement of existing capacity. Here again, that economic consideration in terms of caps, etc. But there's I wouldn't say there's not a potential. There's an avenue, but that avenue is not through the GPE.
Not through the GP. Okay, understood. You've lifted your bat, and I think you've allowed it to go to the boundary, right?
well, as I said, it's not a shutdown, but an opportunity elsewhere.
So, Mr. Jampro, why should somebody overseas invest in energy in Jamaica?
Yeah, so let me just say this. First of all, we're a tropical country. We're in the tropics, so talk about solar. We definitely have a greater span of that as a resource. Of course, because we're an island, there is a wind influence, that convection current. So those are some of the geographical factors that I can recall from school. But more importantly, I think, Jamaica is demonstrating itself as the place to invest. And this is not just energy now, but just generally the place to invest. I mean, when you think about the political stable environment that we have, other countries, what takes place whenever there's a change in government. And we have seen a recent change in government 2 years or so back, and essentially it's a smooth transition, because there's fundamental agreement around, critical policies, so the continuation of those policies. So that in itself creates a stable political environment. In terms of our investment regime. We have one that is open and very transparent. No foreign exchange controls, no limit on foreign ownership. All these are things that you encounter elsewhere to be challenging. And there is no restriction on the repatriation of funds. I mean, there is other benefits of being here in Jamaica. The demonstrating that over the past 4 quarters, the reduction in debt to GDP ratio, it speaks to the stability of the environment. I mean, Jamaica is one of those countries on some key economic variables that went into COVID and come out better than they did in COVID. So it speaks to something that's happening broader in the economy. And I think this is the place where people want to invest to take advantage of that kind of platform.
And it sure helps that you get to spend weekends on a beach on the North Coast if you want to, right?
Absolutely, it does. Or if you choose to go in the mountains.
Yeah, mountains, or of course, all the amazing cultural events that take place here on a constant basis. So I guess in kind of wrapping it up from our discussion point of view before we start taking questions from the audience, we're going to market, lack of a better phrase, within a couple of weeks for 100 megawatts. You're expecting ultimately, based on the IRP, to be at around 268, call it 300 megawatts of power. And then, of course, you spoke earlier about the replacement of existing capacity. Is that within that 268, or
No.
is that separate?
Separate from the
That's
268.
separate. Okay. Now, the replacement of the existing capacity that's owned by the sole buyer,
That's correct.
how is that going to be handled?
It's a function of their license. So it's they have what we call the right of first refusal. So they would go through a process of submitting documents, etc. An assessment would be done around cost and pricing again as well too. But they, as I said before, have the right to replace existing capacity that they have first. If there is not necessarily an agreement, or they fail to meet the price gap, in inverted commas, so to speak, then there is the potential for this to be placed into the open market for auction.
Okay, so they have right of first refusal to replace the equipment that they currently own and operate, as and when that becomes end of life. My speculation is that some of the equipment could get to it may not get to end of life before it's actually time to replace it to achieve the 50%. I think that's a possibility. If that be the case, then clearly there's going to have to be some considerations provided to them at that point. But ultimately, to be clear, either they themselves or they arguably in partnership with independent power providers, which they currently have PPAs with, would be able to make that investment as they see fit for that block of replacement.
They themselves, not necessarily other IPPs, but it's their right to exercise. And if they choose not to exercise that, then it becomes something that would replace them in the market.
So answer the long, medium term, because we're talking 5 years, 6 years before we hit the tape at 50%. Knowing what you know, and not taking tales out of school, are we is 50% something that we can get to? And at the same time, not ending up with higher costs to the consumer? Because that's a burning bush issue for all consumers in Jamaica. Electricity costs in Jamaica are higher than many countries in the region. And there are historic reasons for that, but nonetheless, clearly everybody wants to see a lower electricity bill. And I think you had commented in a discussion we had a few years ago, where there is a country in the Middle East where they charge 0.1 of a cent or something ludicrously cheap for electricity cost, and people protest and argue and saying it's too expensive. So I recognize that there is an emotional aspect to it as well. But from an economic point of view, and from where you sit, are we looking like we're going to be able to make this happen?
Right. So the people who look at this thing tells me that, you know, do the IRP tells me that it's possible, and it's possible to do it at economic cost. I take the view, and I hope that because in the end, I think we have to be pragmatic. Goals are not, targets ought not to be end in themselves. Ends in themselves. Those targets ought to be that they're getting to this target is going to deliver some benefit in terms of social welfare. If we get to 50% target for renewables, and we do so at significantly higher cost, we would have done the country a disservice. And certainly we've even taken into consideration environmental considerations. So it must be that there is a logic, there is a thinking that we can get to 50% and do so at lower rates. And if that is the aim, if it is not the aim, and if that's not the reality, then one would hope that if the reality dawns on us that we can't get to 50 without significant stranded costs and raising electricity rates over the short to medium and perhaps even the long term, then we would make the adjustments as we go along. But I think right now the thinking is that you can get to 50 and you can do it at a lower cost than what currently obtains. I hope that is correct.
No. Yeah. Well, I think we all hope so, right? Yeah. Lennox in particular. So okay, we're almost at time, and what I suggest, rather than carry on with this, I'd love to start to open questions, the Q&A from the participants online. I see a couple of questions in here. First off, there's one to Lennox. You want me to read it for you, sir?
Yes,
this is a test, right?
Right. So the first one there from Ava.
Scroll up.
Yeah. Whether it is a commercial consideration to use renewable or have they been instructed? What I commented on earlier, Ava, is what is in the law. So the law is makes no firm determination one way or another where in terms of what the technology should be in terms of the replacement of the existing capacity, what form it should take. So if there are other consideration at this point in time, I can't necessarily comment on those, but I was just speaking from the perspective that if JPS is exercising its ROFA, then I'd have to be guided by what is in the law, one, and two, if there is agreement on particular policy positions that would have been agreed in that regard. But the law currently does not restrict them based on our reading and the advice that we would have had.
So I guess just a bit of a follow-up on that, though. It's that I think they were asking around are we going to in some way force JPS to replace their existing capacity with renewables to be able to achieve the 50%? And is that necessary is my question. I don't know the math.
And I don't know the answer either, because still, I have to speak to what the law allows and permits, but JPS is a commercial entity. If there are other considerations at play in that regard, there can always be other considerations and discussions with a commercial entity, but the law certainly does not force them in a particular way at this point in time, based on my reading of it and my advice on it. So, if there are policy consideration, we wait to see those play out between the parties, and we will act accordingly based on what is there.
You're the executor of policy.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, I got you. Next question, Colin from Vancouver, and I guess he's building the world's strongest solar panels, and he will be putting in 100 megawatt RFP for it, but he's wondering if they were to set up a manufacturing facility in Jamaica supplying the region, what would that mean? That sounds like a jumper question. That really sounds like a jumper question.
No, we positively welcome that kind of investment interest. Ultimately, we are guided by the final decision when that is made around who has been selected. But those kinds of consideration, certainly from an investment perspective, is something that we welcome, and hopefully you are one of the selected winner, if you will. But until that selection has been made, really, we can't say definitively where things will go. However, we are willing to lend support as part of the facilitation effort that we provide at JAMPRO, and I'm willing to have further discussions with you beyond this exchange here.
Just to at some point in my past, I wore the cap as being deputy president of the Manufacturers and Exporters Association, and just to say that any opportunity to welcome on board in the country additional manufacturing capacity, and in particular not just to supply Jamaica but also to supply the region, would be welcome news from a Jamaican point of view. And it would also be something that would be very much facilitated. And I know JAMPRO would do everything they can to make it happen. I think that the opportunities are tremendous in terms of alternate energy or green energy outputs, manufacturing in country that would allow you to sell into all of CARICOM, and potentially into areas, some countries in Central America, depending on the free trade arrangements that we have in place, as well as Dominican Republic.
Right.
So, and then of course we do have free trade agreements depending on sufficient transformation taking place here, that would then allow you to qualify to export back into the United States, areas like Florida and so on, as well as certainly Central and South America. So there is an opportunity, and I can assure you that we do have good, competent, capable young people to run the facilities for you. It would be a fantastic opportunity for us in Jamaica to see that kind of investment take place. And JAMPRO is certainly here to facilitate that happening. So I'm looking for questions, and just to advise in the interim that Canadian investors should actually contact the Canadian Trade Commissioner here in Kingston, Ms. Yasmin Chung, for advice and support they may require during the process. And of course, part 2 of the CCSOS 23 will look at the financing and partnerships with the local investment community. So I guess that's where you're going to be able to talk to the banks and the investment houses, of which there are many in Jamaica. A few of them actually have direct connections back to Canadian banks, just to reassure you of that, including Bank of Nova Scotia, BNS, and CIBC. So I think with that, I see no other questions. And so I think we will call it a day. And I think we'll be able to give all of us an extra half hour of our lives back. So, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much for being here. I'd like to thank the Canadian High Commission for facilitating this discussion. I hope that it was worthwhile to the listeners. And thank you very much for your active participation, gentlemen. Please look after yourselves. And thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.